What makes the achievement of emotional sobriety so difficult is the habits we have, the patterns we have in our behavior, the habitual ways that we've come to think about things. We have to really become aware of those things in order to challenge them, because the consciousness that has created a lot of the problems in our life cannot solve it, cannot change things. So what happens is the first step is waking up. We've started to now explore and discuss step 10, and we're going to be continuing that on tonight. And next week is going to be a whole meeting focused on gratitude, given that it's Thanksgiving. The week after that, Dr. Michael McGee is going to come in and talk about dealing with our self-hate. And then the week after that, we will go into step 11. So that's the agenda for the next several weeks. So everybody has a heads up on it. As I mentioned, tonight we're going to continue our exploration of step 10. And once again, I always like to put this in the following context. So it's steps 6 and 7. We took a look at our character defaults, and we've come to call them those. These were the way that we adapted to particular situations in our life, and it was the best solution that we could find at the moment to ensure our existence, to ensure our survival, to ensure our centeredness. So, of course, and necessarily, there's going to be certain compromises we make. So we disown certain parts of ourselves. Other parts of ourselves that we think fit in that situation are going to be emphasized. Other parts of ourselves are going to be ignored or disowned and sent off to Siberia somewhere. Well, we take a look at these things and we realize is that in order for us to achieve emotional sobriety, we have to recover all of these fragmented parts of ourselves. And so that's what we're doing, is that we're now trying to, it's the Humpty Dumpty, therapy. We're trying to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And we're getting help from all the king's horses and all the king's men, so to speak. Now, as we're doing that, in step number, and it's what I love about step number 7, is now we make a commitment to developing the best possible attitude we can have towards ourselves, towards our relationship with others, and also towards life itself. That's the pivot that takes place in step 6 and 7. We see who we're not in the spirit of becoming what we can be. And we get to work on these things. And so, as always happens, a charge is built up. Okay, you're going to develop the best possible attitude. And now the steps come along and say, okay, now do this. We'll make a list of all the people you've harmed. And take a look at that list and see what you can learn about yourself from that list, and then get yourself mobilized to actually do something about it. Remember what I said before. One of the wonderful things about the 12 steps, that it's both a psychodynamic program where we're looking at understanding what's going on, understanding and analyzing ourselves, understanding our behavior, but at the same time, taking our understanding and engaging in new behaviors. So it's a wonderful program in that it's bringing, both of those, that behavioral approach and the psychodynamic approach together and integrating that. So in 8 and 9, we go to our past. We look at those people that we've harmed, including ourselves. We start learning. We commit ourselves to cleaning up our past. As my dear friend Thom Rutledge says, go in the past and learn as much from it and take care of as much as you need to, and then get the hell out of there. And that's what we're doing in step 10, because we're taking what we learned about taking responsibility for ourselves and maintaining and now respecting and honoring our integrity. And we are going to bring that into a here and now practice. I love what Tom said last week about step 10 being something about regret prevention therapy. I think about it as regret busting therapy, right? Is that we're now going to try to live our life without adding more unresolved baggage to our life, but keeping ourselves current and present and continuing to develop and expand our awareness, as you're going to see we do in step 11 as well. And so the first part of step 10 was taking that spot check inventory that I talked about, right? Is bringing our awareness to the here and now. This is a here and now step. That's the great thing about this step. It's a here and now. This step ensures that humility will be the backbone for our seeking the best possible attitudes and behavior towards ourselves and others and life itself. So we're continuing to deepen the roots of our humility with this step. Now, the second part of step 10 is what Bill Wilson called the daily balance sheet. That's how he described it. This is what he said. He says, when evening comes, perhaps just before going to sleep, many of us draw up a balance sheet for the day. You see, inventory making is not always done in red ink. Waking hours are usually filled with things that are constructive. Good intentions, good thoughts, and good acts are there for us to see. Even when we have tried hard and failed, we may chalk that up to one of the greatest credits of all. Under these conditions, the pains of failure are converted into assets. Listen to that. The pains of failure are converted into assets. This is alchemy, folks. We're converting lead into gold. Out of them, out of converting our failures into assets, out of them we receive the stimulation, and the way I like to think about it, we receive the information and further motivation to go forward. Pain is and was the touchstone of all spiritual progress. Then he goes on to say, when we're thinking about making this daily balance sheet, because we're looking at, hey, what did I do that I can feel good about today? And what did I do that I'm still questioning or that I'm wondering about? He goes, we need to carefully examine our motives. I think when he talks about this, I put in here that we also need to carefully examine our expectations and unenforceable rules. We need to examine these in each thought and act that appears to be wrong. Remember, we replaced, it's a spiritual axiom that every time that we're disturbed, there's something wrong with me. Well, we're going to get rid of the wrong. We're going to say there's something off with me, right? There's something just off. So we need to examine these things, especially when there appears to be something off. We're knocked off balance, that we're sitting there and we keep thinking about it. That doesn't seem right about this. He goes and says, here, we try to visualize how we might have done better. Now, I don't know if you guys were here in the discussion that happened last time when Roger was talking to one of the participants in the meeting, and he was asking that participant that one way of dealing with something, the behavior you have that you don't feel good about, is visualizing yourself doing it in a better way. Well, Bill Wilson was doing that same thing. He was a neurolinguistic programmer, obviously. He got into that stuff, even though he didn't know about it. So he goes, here we try to visualize how we might have done better and resolve to carry these lessons over into tomorrow, making, of course, any amends still neglected. He goes on to say that you've got to beware when this is happening of the ancient enemy of rationalization, he calls it, the ancient enemy of rationalization. He goes, that gets us imagining we had good motives and reasons when we really didn't. You see, there's a part of us that can turn something that is wrong into something we believe is right. And we've got to look out for that righteousness where we try to justify some behavior that's really shitty behavior. So what's the best possible attitude that we're developing out of this stuff? Well, we saw our best possible attitude in step 9 was to take radical responsibility for ourselves and to take responsibility to go to others and to try to make them whole, to bring some justice, nobility, to make amends for those things that we've done. Now, here's what Bill says about this step. He says, learning daily to spot, admit, and correct these flaws is the essence of character building. I'd say it's the essence of emotional sobriety and good living. An honest regret for harms done, a genuine gratitude for gifts received, and a willingness to try for better things tomorrow will be the permanent assets we shall seek. So now we've taken all the things that we've been working on in the previous 9 steps, and we begin to integrate these into our life today. Now our life is based on a very different foundation. Instead of needing to be right, we need to be right with ourselves, not to be right with others, but we need to honor ourselves in our integrity. And not only honor our individuality, but also honor our connections with others. We're balancing that desire for togetherness with our individuality. Well, my goodness, what an incredible program. So with that, I will turn this discussion over to Thom and Roger and see what they would like to add for tonight before we open this up to everybody else. Gentlemen.
Yeah. Hello. Where's Roger?
I don't know. Can I get an amen for that tonight?
There he is. This is very good. Yes.
I am here. Hello, Thom. Hey, Alan. Hello, everyone. All right, Thom, you fired up? You got something?
Sure. I love ancient enemy of rationalization, the ancient enemy of rationalization. I love that. I'd never noticed that before. It's like the notes I made about that was just realizing that rationalization, all the various, aspects, the intrapersonal aspects of personality, that my rationalization through the years, not just drinking, but just through the years of being, not exactly, kind of not so right. That rationalization part has really, and it still exists. It's like it's just there. It has a life of its own, and it speaks automatically. It's one of those spontaneous speakers to me. It was like I can come up with the rationalization. If there was a contest, and maybe when we get together and do something live, we should create some contests like this. Who can come up with the fastest rationalization, the most creative rationalization, excuses, things like that. Because even though my daily practice of recovery is to not go that direction, I still hear from those guys. They still talk to me. They immediately, or I often will make them up for other people. I will hear a client talking about something, and if I know the client well, I'll say, I got a better one than you. Here's how I would have played that back in the day, and we kind of can get creative about that. But I love that that's a part of this, and because it goes to intent. And I think this whole thing of the 8th, 9th, and 10th step, it does require us to be focused, excuse me, on intent. And I just wanted to do this. I'm having a little problem with the allergies today. But I want to shift over here. I want to read a little piece out of the 12 and 12 with step 10, and just make a comment about how this fits into here. It's like, to set it up, there's a part, the end of a paragraph says, excuse me, many of us also like the experience of occasional retreat from the outside world, where we can go and sit down and undisturbed and for a self-overhaul or meditation. We're talking about going back and doing more inventory. And then this next paragraph begins, aren't these practices joy killers as well as time consuming? most AAs spend most of their waking hours dreading, rehashing their sins of omission and commission. Or that's a question, don't we? Well, hardly. The emphasis, and here's the point I really like. The emphasis on inventory is heavy only because a great many of us have never really acquired the habit of accurate self-appraisal. And I love this idea this is reparation. This is corrective action. It's like and just like anything else, just like learning anything else, with repetition of doing this becomes our new normal. And that daily inventory, for those, and really I think it's fair to say most of us do that who've been at this for a while. There is, we may need to be reminded sometimes to focus on it a little bit more, but it's like, it really isn't extra effort. It really is just my way of being. And it's a little bit like my car these days, these magic cars we have that if I get too close to somebody else in traffic, it starts making that beeping sound, to tell me that. I think we have little beeping sounds in our recovery that tell us we're a little bit, we're a little off, or a little close to the edge, the wrong lane, too close to the other guy in traffic. And it's like, I like that idea. And I like the idea that this becomes our new normal, and that we are making this, normal. That's not particularly eloquent, but that's what I have to say.
What a great phrase, though, right? Accurate self-appraisal.
It is.
Accurate. Yeah. That's the heart of this thing is, look, we're learning to get honest with ourselves here. The degree of self-honesty is foreign for us. No question.
Well, and the thing you said, Alan, is so cool, because this is about where, we make jokes. The three of us make jokes a lot of times about how proud we are of our humility. It's like, and we like the twist of terms, but one of the reason, humility is my favorite part of recovery, because it's the thing that it is what creates freedom for me. It is my willingness to admit when I'm wrong, makes me feel free to take chances. To be adventurous, to be able to, it doesn't mean not be careful, but I don't have to get, so cool to not have to get things right the first time. And it's like, so that's what I love about this that's what step 10 does, is like, I really know from my experience that when I screw something up, as soon as I'm aware of it, I don't care if I don't want to go back and make that amend or make that correction. I will do that. I've done that through my life. And when I was first doing that, I would turn, if I was an asshole to a clerk in a store, I would be almost home 30 minutes down the road, and I'd be going, fuck, it's like, and I'd turn around and go back. And it's like, and so what I'll say is sometimes I'm a good person because I'm a good person. And sometimes I'm a good person because I'm lazy and I just don't want to have to go back and apologize for it later. So I just do it right the first time, but it's like, it's really a good feeling to trust myself, that I know that I will do that.
Right. Yeah. I like what you just said a lot, Tom, that it's a different experience for us, I think, in our lives. I know it is for me in my life. If I take that perfectionistic pressure off of myself, of having to do stuff the right way, the best way, the perfect way, a way that's totally protected from criticism, right? Or from negative evaluation from myself or others. It's such, when I'm able to be there, because often I'm not, it's such a freeing experience within myself. I literally feel a sense of tension and pressure, leaving my body and my mind, because all of a sudden now there's space. Space for what? Space to be me, space to be imperfect, right? Space to make mistakes. And what helps with that, as you said, is a willingness to make amends, to apologize, to try to make it right. Whenever that happens. And if it's me, it happens, often. I'll put it this way. It happens often enough to keep me in good practice, right? With making amends to people.
Me too.
There's one other piece I wanted to mention. And again, this is more of a balancing idea, I think, between extremes, finding some middle ground. But, we talk a lot in emotional sobriety, and Alan has written eloquently about, the harm of excessive dependency and all the harms associated with not learning how to know ourselves and be true to ourselves and allowing others to edit our reality too much. And I get all of that. All of those are real important pieces of differentiation, right? Of forming my sense of self. But the other part of it is that if we allow ourselves to take in feedback that other people are giving us in our life, that can be one of the most valuable sources we have of learning about ourselves, right? Especially about our relationship patterns, of learning about our defensiveness or where my ego takes charge of me, or learning about my obsequiousness, right? My always playing the underdog in a situation or whatever it is. To me, I often say to my clients, when they're asking me questions about a specific thing about what to do, I'll turn to them and say, I am not your teacher in this situation. Your life is your teacher in this situation, right? And if you're like me, I don't listen to the lessons of my life very well a lot of the time. My ego gets in the way, my pride gets in the way, my rationalizations get in the way. But part of that life experience is being open to and receptive to the feedback that other people have to give us, right? About where our limitations are, where our shortcomings are, where our patterns are. Because we've said over and over again, this self-awareness and self-knowledge are the key to all of this, because until we become aware of our patterns, we have no means to change them, really. And I just wanted to mention that piece, that while over-dependency does us a huge harm, all the harms that, Alan and Thom, and more recently, Alan, Thom, and I have been talking about for more than 40 weeks. And while, allowing people to edit our experience and our reality too much also does us great harm, not being open to the feedback from other people at all, especially when I'm really misguided in my own egocentrism and my own ideas about, what to do or how to handle the situation, that can be one of the most valuable sources of feedback we have. It's one of the reasons we're in this meeting, right? Is to get feedback and to get impressions that we can take in and allow ourselves to be affected by that. So I felt very, very humbled, Alan, when you were just reading, Bill's ideas about how to do that end of the day, inventory, that end of the day balance sheet, because it's serious stuff, it's very humbling to think about opening ourselves enough and looking at ourselves clearly enough to really do that self-assessment. But it's incredibly valuable. So that's where I want to finish.
I wanted to share something that I went to a workshop that was run by Dr. David Snarch a few years ago at the American Psychological Association's annual meeting. I did an all-day workshop with him because I just love his work so much. And it was interesting. He says, well, when you go into a restaurant, he says, look around you. And he says, how do you know who's married and who's dating? And he says, the couples that are dating are looking at each other and talking to each other. They're engaged. They're still are hopeful somebody's going to see them and listen to them. He says, the couples that are married, they're sitting there silent with each other. And he says, do not believe for a second it's because they have nothing to say to each other. It's that they have a lot to say to each other, but they know where it's going to go. Nowhere. And so there's no discussion about anything that's meaningful because it's going to get shut down because of what you're talking about. Is you got to be open to the feedback instead of defending yourself and say, hey, Is there something here that fits? Am I culpable in some way? Is to take it in first and chew it up for a while before you just spit it out. But you won't find that in most relationships. Your partner's going to tell you what's wrong with you, and you're going to tell your partner what's wrong with them. And what he said is the truth of it is nobody knows us better than our partner. And a lot of the feedback we have, we need to pay attention to. It was a great message.
Right. That's beautiful. That's right.
Yep.
I want to add one more little piece, but that is because this is one of the things that I have thought about several times and I have not brought up yet. It's like we get to choose our sources of self-esteem, just like we get to choose our sources of nutrition. It's like and everything doesn't have to count. This is what I learned about perfectionism recovery. It's like everything doesn't count the same. If you come to my funeral and if I'm a ghost and listening in, and you come to my funeral and you talk about what a flake and a disorganized administrator I am, you do not hurt my ghost's feelings. It's like, because I don't give a shit. It's like I care a little bit because I don't like to inconvenience other people. But it's like I don't take much self-esteem from that. But if you say, I don't think he cared about me, I don't think he paid attention, I would have a problem with that. But one of the things that shifts in this process and at this point in the program is that part of the self-esteem is that we take a great deal of value from learning. And it's like how much so on a day that I really screwed something up, the self-esteem comes from on a good day, if I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, I'm calling one of you guys up and checking it out and bouncing it off of you and stuff, is I can say, okay, that was a day in which I did good and felt bad. But the doing good is about, I've learned some things that I'm going to apply from here on. And that reinforces, this was something I had never had before recovery, that reinforces my self-esteem because I'm learning, and that feels great.
Well, and that's one of the things that and we'll be talking about, especially as we wrap up all the 12 steps. But another way of looking at the 12 steps, and it's not coincidental that we can look at the 12 steps as a program for developing your self-esteem and increasing your self-esteem. Because all of what we're doing, if you go into Dr. Nathaniel Brandon's readings, and we will do that when we're done with the 12 steps and looking at it from the point of view of emotional sobriety, we'll take a few times and look at it from the point of view of self-esteem.
I hear a lot of people criticize the 12 steps, that they're old-fashioned. I can understand that criticism. They were written back in 1935. Some people that are agnostic have difficulty with the word God used in the steps. For me, I look at the process that's involved. The forces that the 12 steps generate are so powerful that I think they're ageless. There's this interesting phenomena that happens when you work the steps. They create a charge and then a discharge. The first step, we're powerless. Our life has become unmanageable. It creates this charge. We're in big trouble and we don't know what to do. And then step 2 comes along and it says we have hope. That charge, that existential crisis that we have is resolved. What's happening here is parallel to life. We charge ourselves when we breathe in. When we exhale, we discharge. That's the rhythm of life. And the way I love to think about the 12 steps, it's helping us get connected to the rhythm of life so we can learn how to show up in a good way.